The journey begins. Marcus James woke up to the familiar hum of city life filtering through his bedroom window. The morning sun was bright but gentle, casting a warm glow over his neatly organized room. Today was Friday, usually his busiest day of the week. But as he stirred his coffee, he knew today would be anything but usual. The recent complaint emails from one of his dealerships had been weighing on him, and after a restless night, he'd made a decision. He was going to investigate the complaints himself. Marcus was a man defined by grit and resilience, known for building his business empire from the ground up. A successful black entrepreneur in the luxury automotive world, he owned a chain of luxury car dealerships that spanned the entire state. While most people only saw his success, Marcus never forgot his humble beginnings. He had grown up in a working-class neighborhood, raised by parents who worked tirelessly to provide for him and his siblings. He'd started his journey in sales with very little in his pocket, yet with a vision and an unbreakable determination. Decades of hard work later, he built a name and a brand synonymous with luxury, reliability, and integrity. But success hadn't shielded him from the experiences that came with being a black man in a predominantly white and affluent industry. He was no stranger to prejudiced glances, assumptions, and closed doors. The one thing Marcus prided himself on was the fairness and respect he instilled in his company culture. Everyone who stepped into his dealerships deserved to be treated with dignity, no matter their appearance or background. So, hearing that customers were being treated poorly at one of his locations struck a nerve. As Marcus got ready, he decided he needed a change in appearance, a dramatic one. Normally, his closet was filled with tailored suits, crisp dress shirts, and polished shoes. Today, he dug to the back of his wardrobe for a pair of faded jeans, a worn gray t-shirt, and old sneakers he hadn't worn in years. He caught his reflection in the mirror, noting how different he looked. He ran a hand over his unshaven chin, wondering if anyone would recognize him in this getup. He felt a bit uncomfortable. It had been years since he dressed like this. He hadn't realized how much his clothes had come to symbolize the power and authority he'd earned. But today, he didn't want authority. He wanted to be a regular customer, unnoticed, unrecognized, and unremarkable. Finally, he chose his car for the day. Usually, Marcus drove one of the luxury models his dealership sold, a sleek black sedan that made heads turn as he cruised through the city. But today, he chose a car he hadn't driven in years. An old, modest sedan he kept for sentimental reasons. It had been his very first car, bought secondhand when he was fresh out of college. The worn leather seats and faint scent of old vinyl brought back memories of long drives, dreaming about the life he now lived. As he pulled out of his driveway, he took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past merge with the present. He was ready to see if the values he held so dear were being upheld when he wasn't watching. The dealership was an hour away, located in one of the city's bustling commercial districts. As he drove, Marcus's mind wandered to the challenges he faced on his journey. He remembered the countless meetings where he was judged before he even opened his mouth, the skepticism he faced when he tried to secure funding, and the patronizing advice he received about knowing his place. Those experiences had driven him to work twice as hard, to prove every doubter wrong. The world might have seen him as an unlikely success, but he knew he was precisely where he was meant to be. Arriving at the dealership, Marcus parked in a corner of the large lot, away from the gleaming rows of new cars that lined the front. The dealership was bustling with activity. Salespeople moved between customers, flashing smiles and gestures that seemed choreographed to exude charm and enthusiasm. Dressed as he was, Marcus felt invisible, almost as if he had stepped into someone else's life. He walked through the lot slowly, observing the cars and taking mental notes of the sales team's behavior. He soon noticed a pattern. The well-dressed customers received immediate attention. Salespeople flocked to them, eagerly explaining the features of the latest models. But the less polished visitors, those dressed in more casual clothes, perhaps younger or with families, were either ignored or directed to the lot's far end, where older, more affordable models were displayed. The difference in treatment was subtle but unmistakable. After a few minutes, Marcus spotted a salesman lingering near the luxury section, adjusting his tie and glancing at his watch. The man was tall, with neatly combed hair, dressed in a tailored suit that spoke of ambition and self-importance. His name tag read, Ben. Marcus approached him with a neutral expression. "Excuse me," he said, trying to keep his tone even. "I'm interested in buying a car." Ben's gaze flicked over him quickly, a hint of disdain evident in his eyes. "Oh," he said, his voice laced with barely concealed irritation. "Sure. What kind of car are you looking for?" "I'm interested in one of the higher-end models," Marcus replied, his eyes drifting to a gleaming black luxury sedan nearby. "Something comfortable with good performance." Ben's eyes widened just slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing his face, before it was replaced with a forced smile. "I see," he replied, though his tone made it clear he didn't believe Marcus could afford anything close to what he was asking for. "Maybe we should take a look at some of the pre-owned options over here first." He gestured dismissively toward a row of used cars in the back corner of the lot, cars that had clearly seen better days. Marcus felt a flash of irritation but kept his composure. "Actually, I'd really like to see that one," he insisted, nodding toward the luxury sedan. Ben's expression faltered momentarily, and he let out a small dismissive chuckle. "That's a top-of-the-line model. I wouldn't want you to waste your time on something outside of your budget." Marcus took a slow, steady breath. The moment felt familiar, almost painfully so. This was a scene he'd encountered countless times in his career. The silent judgment, the dismissal, the assumption that he couldn't possibly belong in a world of luxury and success. "I'd still like to take a look at it," he replied, his voice firm. Ben sighed, clearly frustrated but forced to maintain a veneer of professionalism. "Fine," he muttered. "I'll get the keys." He returned a moment later, keys in hand, but his disinterest was obvious. He unlocked the car with a swift click, barely bothering to give Marcus a tour of the features as they approached the vehicle. Marcus slid into the driver's seat, feeling the smooth leather beneath him. He asked a few questions about the car's features, its handling, and its reliability, but Ben's responses were curt and dismissive. Throughout the short test drive, Marcus could feel Ben's impatience simmering beside him, his clipped answers betraying his belief that Marcus was wasting his time. When they returned to the dealership, Ben wasted no time steering Marcus back toward the entrance, his body language screaming impatience. "So," he said, forcing a strained smile, "are you interested in buying today, or?" Marcus felt a pang of disappointment. He knew he could reveal his identity at any moment, but he wanted to see how far Ben would go, how deeply ingrained his prejudice truly was. "I'd like to talk about the price," Marcus said calmly. Ben's patience snapped. He let out an exaggerated sigh and crossed his arms, leveling Marcus with a cold stare. "Look, I don't want to waste your time here. These cars aren't for everyone, you know. Maybe something more economical would be a better fit for you." The words cut, as Marcus expected they would. They echoed every subtle rejection he'd faced, every barrier he'd had to shatter to prove his worth. But he didn't give in to anger. Instead, he stood tall, looking Ben directly in the eye. "Maybe I need to speak with the owner," Marcus said, his voice calm and steady. "I think he'd understand what I'm looking for." Ben chuckled, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "The owner? He's a busy man. I don't think he's going to come down here just for this." Marcus held his gaze, his patience reaching its limit. "Well," he said slowly, letting the weight of his words sink in, "I am the owner. And you're right. I don't have time to waste on people who can't treat customers with respect." The color drained from Ben's face as he realized his mistake, and Marcus stood there, calm and composed, ready to teach a lesson he hoped would resonate long after he walked out of that dealership. A bitter first impression. Marcus stood motionless for a moment, allowing the gravity of his words to settle into the charged silence between him and Ben. As realization dawned on the salesman's face, A mixture of shock and embarrassment flickered across his features, but Marcus didn't let it linger for long. Without another word, he turned and began walking through the dealership, silently observing the interactions unfolding around him. His heart still beat heavily from the anger he had stifled during his encounter with Ben. Each step he took was an effort to maintain control, to remind himself that this wasn't the first time he had faced discrimination based on assumptions about his appearance, and it likely wouldn't be the last. But as he moved deeper into the showroom, something unexpected happened. Marcus found himself catching fragments of conversation, noticing how other salespeople interacted with the customers who, like himself, didn't appear to fit the mold of a luxury car buyer. In one corner, he spotted a young couple hovering around a mid-range SUV, talking quietly with each other while glancing toward a group of salespeople. The husband, dressed in construction work clothes, appeared nervous, as if uncertain they should even be in the store. Marcus felt a pang of familiarity in their hesitation, the very feeling he had hoped to leave behind long ago. Just as he was about to step over and introduce himself, he saw another salesman, a tall, lean young man named Elliot, notice the couple. Elliot had been casually chatting with a well-dressed customer who was browsing one of the high-end sedans. Marcus watched with interest as Elliot concluded his conversation quickly and approached the couple with a welcoming smile, asking if they needed assistance. Marcus felt his tension ease slightly as he observed Elliot's genuine, attentive demeanor. The salesman took time to listen to the couple's needs, asking thoughtful questions and guiding them to a vehicle that suited both their taste and budget. The young couple visibly relaxed in his presence, their earlier nervousness fading as they started engaging enthusiastically. Watching this, Marcus made a mental note of Elliot's name, feeling a spark of hope that perhaps not everyone in his organization had lost sight of the core values he had tried to instill. But it wasn't long before his attention was drawn elsewhere. Across the showroom, another customer, a middle-aged woman with worn clothes and a tired expression, was looking around uncertainly. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her hands, rough from what appeared to be years of labor, clutched a large canvas bag. She hesitated in front of a modest sit-in, as though unsure if she should even approach it. Just then, Ben appeared again, clearly trying to shake off the embarrassment of his recent encounter with Marcus. He approached the woman with a tight-lipped smile, his eyes flicking over her with barely disguised impatience. Marcus moved closer, just within earshot, and watched as Ben assumed his typical stance. Arms crossed, shoulders stiff, his whole demeanor exuding an air of dismissive authority. "Is there something I can help you with?" Ben asked, his tone professional but lacking warmth. The woman looked up, visibly hesitant. "Yes, I was wondering about the financing options on this model," she said, her voice soft, almost apologetic. Ben let out a quiet sigh, just loud enough for Marcus to hear. "The financing on this vehicle isn't exactly flexible," he replied, carefully enunciating each word as if she might not understand otherwise. "Maybe a used car would be more suitable for your budget." The woman's face fell, her expression turning from hope to disappointment in a matter of seconds. She stammered something about just wanting to understand her options, but Ben was already looking past her, scanning the room for more promising prospects. Marcus clenched his jaw, feeling his earlier anger simmer back to the surface. Unable to watch any longer, he approached Ben, and the woman, his stride purposeful, his voice calm but firm. "Excuse me, Mom," he said, addressing the woman directly. "I couldn't help but overhear. Are you interested in this sit-in?" The woman's eyes widened slightly as she took in his casual appearance, seemingly surprised that someone else was paying attention to her. "Yes, but I'm not sure I can afford it," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I just thought I'd ask about it." Marcus offered her a reassuring smile. "We can definitely go over the options with you. This dealership prides itself on helping people find what they need, no matter the budget." Ben's face tightened, his impatience barely concealed as he shifted his weight uncomfortably. "I was just explaining that to her," "Sir," he said, the edges of his words strained, "we have a wide range of vehicles. I was simply trying to guide her towards something more suitable." But Marcus ignored him, keeping his attention focused on the woman. "Ma'am, I'd be happy to help you personally," he said, gesturing toward the sedan she had been admiring. "Let's go over the details and see if we can find a way to make it work." For the first time since she had stepped foot in the dealership, the woman's face brightened. She nodded, looking a bit relieved, and followed Marcus over to a quieter corner of the showroom. They sat down, and Marcus patiently explained the financing options, breaking down each term in a way that was clear and accessible. He could tell she was overwhelmed, but he continued with patience, answering each question and encouraging her to take her time. During their conversation, Marcus glanced over his shoulder and noticed Ben watching them from afar, his face a mix of confusion and resentment. Perhaps Ben thought Marcus was just another customer who'd somehow taken over his job. But Marcus didn't let it distract him. Instead, he focused on helping this woman understand her options and feel valued, something he had fought to ensure every customer experienced, regardless of their background. After nearly an hour of discussion, the woman thanked Marcus profusely, her eyes misty with gratitude. She had decided to take a couple of days to think it over, but Marcus could see the appreciation in her eyes. As she left the dealership, she turned back, offering one final grateful smile before stepping out. The encounter left Marcus with mixed emotions, pride in being able to make a difference for her, but a simmering frustration at the attitudes he had seen displayed by some of his staff. He couldn't ignore the fact that for every Elliot, there was a Ben, someone willing to judge customers based on appearance alone. Determined to address this issue, Marcus moved toward the back offices, where he knew the managers held their morning meetings. He entered without knocking, surprising a group of sales managers who were gathered around a conference table. As he stepped into the room, their conversation died abruptly, and a few heads turned in confusion, wondering who this casually dressed man was. Clearing his throat, Marcus spoke, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable weight. "Good morning. My name is Marcus James. I'm the owner of this dealership network." A hush fell over the room. One of the managers, a middle-aged man with glasses and a neatly pressed suit, blinked, seemingly taken aback. "Mr. James," he stammered, his surprise evident. We didn't expect you." "That's exactly why I'm here," Marcus replied, his tone steady. "I wanted to see firsthand how customers are treated when I'm not around, and what I've seen today is troubling." He described what he had witnessed, speaking not with anger but with disappointment. This dealership was built on values of respect, integrity, and inclusivity, he continued. "Every customer who walks through our doors should feel valued, whether they're here to buy our most expensive model or a used vehicle." He glanced around the table, noticing the uncomfortable expressions on the managers' faces. "Today, I saw one of your salesmen dismiss a customer simply because she didn't fit the profile of a luxury buyer," he said, his gaze sharp. "This kind of behavior is unacceptable. Our business isn't just about selling cars. It's about building trust, relationships, and loyalty." One of the younger managers spoke up, his face pale. "Mr. James, we apologize. This isn't the standard we aim for. We'll make sure to address this immediately." Marcus nodded, but he wasn't finished. "I don't want apologies. I want accountability. I'll be conducting a workshop for all sales staff next week to discuss our core values and customer service expectations. This isn't just a job, it's a responsibility. We're here to serve, not judge." With that, he left the room, leaving the managers in stunned silence. As he walked back through the showroom, he noticed Ben watching him, a confused and worried expression on his face. Marcus approached him calmly, meeting his eyes directly. "Ben," he said, his voice firm, "I hope today has been a learning experience. Remember, appearances can be deceiving. Every person who walks into this dealership deserves respect, whether they look like they can afford a luxury car or not. I suggest you think about what that means." Ben swallowed, nodding stiffly, his earlier arrogance replaced with quiet shame. Marcus didn't linger. He turned and left the dealership, feeling a sense of closure. But he also knew that this was only the beginning of the changes he intended to make. As he drove home, Marcus couldn't help but feel hopeful. There was still work to be done, but he was ready to keep fighting for the values he believed in. This was his mission: to create a world where respect wasn't a luxury, but a right for everyone. The test drive. The sun had climbed higher, casting a sharper glare across the showroom windows as Marcus lingered in the dealership. After his meeting with the managers, he felt a mixture of satisfaction and lingering disappointment. His values had always centered on inclusivity and respect, but watching those values fade under the weight of prejudice left him deeply unsettled. He was determined to uncover every inch of what had been happening within his company, knowing that the first step to change was transparency. As he wandered back toward the rows of gleaming cars, he decided to take one final action before he left. There was something he wanted to experience personally: a test drive in one of his luxury models. He wanted to see if the same dismissive attitude he'd witnessed with customers would surface again when he presented himself as just another guy looking to browse. He scanned the showroom, looking for a salesperson who wasn't already engaged, and locked eyes with Ben, who was standing near the luxury sedans, still visibly tense from their earlier interaction. Marcus walked up to Ben, a calm expression masking his intent. "I'd like to take one of these cars out for a test drive," he said, his tone even. Ben raised an eyebrow, his composure slipping just slightly as he struggled to mask his disdain. "You want to take a luxury model for a test drive?" he repeated, the edge in his voice unmistakable. "Are you sure about that?" Marcus suppressed a sigh, his patience thinning. "Yes, I'm interested in the model over there," he replied, nodding toward the high-end luxury sedan that gleamed under the lights. Ben hesitated, glancing from Marcus to the car, as if weighing the cost of allowing him the privilege of testing one of their most expensive models. "Look," he said, crossing his arms, "these cars are designed for a particular kind of buyer. I wouldn't want to set you up for disappointment if it turns out to be outside your budget." Marcus inhaled slowly, keeping his calm. "Thank you for your concern, but I think I'll manage," he replied, his voice a quiet assertion of authority. With a reluctant sigh, Ben went to retrieve the keys. Marcus watched as he returned, his expression a mix of resignation and annoyance. He handed the keys over with a stiff nod, gesturing toward the car without a word. The silence between them was tense, charged with the weight of everything left unsaid. Once inside the car, Marcus let his fingers run over the leather interior, feeling the softness beneath his touch. This wasn't just any car. It was a symbol of his success, a testament to the hard work and sacrifices he'd made to reach this point. He could feel the irony of the moment pressing on him. Here he was, in a vehicle he could own a dozen times over, being treated as if he didn't deserve even a moment's respect. Ben slid into the passenger seat, his body language radiating impatience as he buckled his seatbelt. Marcus turned the key, listening to the quiet purr of the engine, feeling the power surge through his hands. He knew every detail about this car, the meticulous engineering, the attention to detail in every stitch of the upholstery. Yet, sitting beside him, Ben remained silent, his eyes fixed out the window, as though he wanted to be anywhere else. As they pulled out of the dealership, Marcus began to ask questions he knew the answers to but posed nonetheless. "How's the handling on sharp curves?" he asked, glancing at Ben. Ben gave a half-hearted nod, barely making eye contact. "It's good. This model's built for performance. Handles curves well," he replied, his voice flat and devoid of enthusiasm. Marcus pressed further. "What about the safety features? I heard there were some updates this year." Ben's expression soured, as though the question were a personal affront. "Yeah, there are some new safety features," he replied tersely. "I can get you the brochure if you want the details." The dismissal in his tone was palpable, and Marcus felt a stab of frustration. It wasn't just the lack of enthusiasm or respect. It was the sheer unwillingness to engage, to make a genuine effort. In Marcus's mind, every customer deserved to feel as if they were the most important person in the room. Every interaction should have been infused with a sense of care and dedication. But for Ben, it was clear that customers who didn't fit his expectations were hardly worth the time. They continued the drive in uncomfortable silence, with Marcus periodically glancing at Ben, whose body language betrayed his impatience. Finally, Marcus decided to address the tension directly. "You don't seem very interested in this test drive," he said, his tone measured but unmistakably pointed. Ben looked taken aback, momentarily thrown off guard. I just didn't want to waste your time," he stammered, his words hesitant. "It's a big purchase, and, well, not everyone is looking for something in this price range." Marcus's gaze remained steady. "I see. So you decided for me that this car was beyond my reach." Ben flushed, his discomfort evident. "That's not what I meant," he said quickly, his words tumbling out in a rush. "I just thought. It's an expensive model, and you don't seem." He trailed off, realizing the implications of what he was saying. Marcus let the silence stretch, watching as Ben squirmed under his scrutiny. "I'd like to know what I seem like to you, Ben," he said finally, his voice soft but laced with an undeniable authority. Ben stammered, his face reddening as he struggled to find the words. "Look, I didn't mean any offense," he muttered, his gaze fixed firmly on his lap. "I just thought you might be interested in something more economical." Marcus nodded slowly, allowing the words to sink in. "You mean, based on my appearance, you assumed I couldn't afford this car?" Ben swallowed, his face a mixture of embarrassment and frustration. "I didn't mean it like that," he insisted, his tone defensive. "I just thought it would be a better fit, that's all." Marcus let out a slow breath, his hands tightening on the steering wheel. "You know, Ben," he began, his voice calm but edged with a quiet anger, "I built this business from nothing. I understand the value of hard work, of treating people with respect, because I know what it feels like to be dismissed, to be told you're not enough." Ben remained silent, his face pale as Marcus continued. "This dealership isn't just about selling luxury cars," he said, his voice carrying a weight that left no room for argument. "It's about creating an experience, making every customer feel valued, regardless of how they look or what you think they can afford." The silence in the car was deafening, thick with the unspoken tension between them. Ben's face was a mask of discomfort, his earlier arrogance replaced with a quiet shame. Marcus could see the struggle in his eyes, the realization of the assumptions he had made, the mistakes he had failed to recognize. As they pulled back into the dealership lot, Marcus parked the car and turned off the engine, allowing the silence to stretch a moment longer. Finally, he turned to Ben, his gaze unwavering. "I want you to take a moment to think about how you approach each customer," he said, his tone firm but not unkind. "Because if you can't see past the surface, if you can't treat every person with respect, you're in the wrong business." Ben nodded slowly, his face a mixture of guilt and unease. I understand," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "I'm sorry." Marcus nodded, accepting the apology but knowing it wasn't enough. Apologies were easy, but change required effort, reflection, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. He knew this was only the beginning of the transformation he hoped to see within his dealership. Without another word, Marcus exited the car, leaving Ben sitting in the passenger seat, lost in thought. As he walked back toward the showroom, he felt a strange sense of calm, a quiet satisfaction that he had confronted an issue that had festered in silence for far too long. But his mission wasn't over. There were still employees to talk to, managers to train, values to reaffirm. Marcus knew that one conversation, one confrontation, was only the beginning. If he wanted real change, he would need to commit himself fully, to lead by example, to instill the same passion for respect and inclusivity that had guided him throughout his life. As he stepped back into the bustling showroom, Marcus's resolve only strengthened. He would build a team that embodied the values he cherished, a team that would create an environment of respect and acceptance for every person who walked through those doors. The revelation. The day was unfolding in unexpected ways. As Marcus re-entered the dealership showroom, he felt a mixture of purpose and tension simmering beneath the polished, busy surface. He had glimpsed firsthand the cracks in the culture he'd worked so hard to establish. Today had already revealed disappointing biases, and as much as he wished the issue ended with Ben, he sensed it might only be the tip of the iceberg. His mind was racing with thoughts on how to root out these issues systematically. But first, he knew he needed to speak with the management team. The situation required a direct address, something that would convey the weight of the values they were straying from. Spotting Ben, Marcus beckoned him over with a quick nod. "Can you call the manager for me?" Marcus asked, keeping his voice steady, but leaving no room for argument. Ben hesitated, a flash of unease crossing his face. But he nodded. Yes, sir. Right away," he stammered, before disappearing into the back office. Moments later, Steve, the general manager, approached Marcus with a welcoming smile, though he looked mildly unsettled. He was a man in his 50s, with graying hair, sharp eyes, and an air of seasoned experience. He reached out a hand to Marcus, who accepted it with a firm grip. "Mr. James, it's an honor to have you here. We weren't expecting you. Otherwise, we would have arranged." "I didn't want you to arrange anything, Steve," Marcus interrupted, his tone calm but firm. "I came here unannounced on purpose. I needed to see how things operate when I'm not watching." Steve blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. "Of course, I understand. Is there something specific you'd like us to address?" "There is," Marcus replied, his gaze direct. "I've noticed some troubling behaviors among the staff. There's a lack of respect toward customers who don't fit a certain profile, people who may not look like they're here to buy a luxury car." Steve's face tightened. "I assure you, Mr. James, we aim to treat all customers with respect." Marcus studied him carefully. "Then why was I, dressed casually, met with disrespect from a member of your sales team? Why did I watch other customers being dismissed because they didn't look like luxury buyers?" Steve's jaw tightened, his discomfort evident. He glanced at Ben, who stood nearby, his head lowered, the picture of guilt. I wasn't aware of any such behavior. I assure you, we'll address it immediately." Marcus took a deep breath, his voice carrying a weight that left no room for dismissal. "Steve, I need you to understand something. This dealership, my entire business, was built on values of integrity, equality, and respect. Every customer, regardless of appearance, deserves to be treated with dignity. What I've witnessed today goes against everything we stand for." Steve nodded, looking visibly chastised. "You're right, sir. I'll speak with the team personally. This behavior is unacceptable." "Good," Marcus replied, his tone softening slightly. "But words aren't enough. We need to take action, to create a culture where respect isn't just encouraged, it's expected. We need a training program, not just for the sales staff, but for management too." Steve's face lit up with understanding, and he nodded in agreement. "Consider it done. We'll organize mandatory training sessions on customer service and diversity for everyone." Marcus inclined his head, feeling a measure of relief. "Thank you, Steve. And one more thing. There's a young couple in your finance office right now, trying to work out a plan for a mid-range SUV. I want to make sure they're offered the same respect and options as any other customer." Steve gave a firm nod. "I'll handle it personally, Mr. James. You have my word." With that, Marcus left the office, his gaze sweeping the showroom once more. He was about to turn and head toward the exit when he noticed Ben standing near the entrance, his posture stiff and uncomfortable. He was clearly unsettled, but Marcus sensed there was something more than guilt behind his demeanor. something unsaid. "Ben," Marcus called, his tone neutral. "Walk with me." Ben stiffened but complied, falling into step beside Marcus as they exited the dealership. Outside, the afternoon sun was bright, casting harsh shadows across the parking lot. Marcus walked slowly, giving Ben time to speak. After a few moments of silence, Ben finally cleared his throat. I wanted to apologize again, Mr. James," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know I messed up. I didn't think. I just made assumptions, and it was wrong." Marcus glanced at him, his expression thoughtful. "You made assumptions, yes, but what concerns me isn't just the mistake. It's the underlying attitude that led you there. Tell me, Ben, what made you look at me and decide I didn't belong?" Ben looked down, his face flushed with embarrassment. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice filled with shame. Maybe it's just how I was taught. I thought if someone didn't look the part, they weren't worth the time. I thought I was being efficient, focusing on people who were serious about buying." Marcus nodded slowly, understanding but not excusing. "I see. But Ben, efficiency doesn't mean judgment. It's not about who looks like they can buy. It's about serving people equally, giving each person the same respect and attention, regardless of their appearance." Ben nodded, his gaze fixed on the ground. "I understand, Mr. James, and I want to change. I don't want to be that guy, the one who assumes the worst about people. I want to learn." Marcus's gaze softened slightly. "Good. Learning is the first step. I'll be rolling out new training sessions for all staff soon, and I expect you to take them seriously. You'll have the opportunity to prove that you're capable of growth." Ben nodded again, visibly relieved. "Thank you, Mr. James. I appreciate the chance." Marcus gave him a small nod before walking back into the dealership, leaving Ben in the parking lot to reflect on their conversation. Inside, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had confronted an issue that had gone unchecked for too long, and now he had an opportunity to rebuild, to re-establish the values that had guided him from the beginning. Just as he was about to leave, he spotted another familiar face entering the showroom. Elliot, the young salesman who had taken the time to help the nervous couple earlier. Marcus observed as Elliot greeted another customer, a middle-aged woman with a warm but tired expression, dressed in simple clothing. He watched as Elliot treated her with the same respect and enthusiasm he had shown the young couple, explaining the details of the model she was interested in with genuine interest. As the woman left, smiling and looking more confident than when she arrived, Marcus approached Elliot, a smile touching his own lips. "Elliot," he began, "I wanted to commend you for the way you handled that customer just now. I've been watching you today, and I can tell you treat each person with care and respect. That's exactly the attitude I want to see more of here." Elliot's face lit up with surprise and gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. James. That means a lot. I believe everyone who walks in deserves our best." Marcus nodded, feeling a sense of pride in the young man. "And that belief will serve you well. People like you set the standard for what I want this dealership to represent. Keep it up." As he shook Elliot's hand, he felt a renewed hope that despite the challenges, there were still people within his organization who believed in the principles he held dear. People like Elliot could be the foundation upon which he would build a new, more inclusive culture. With his spirits lifted, Marcus finally left the dealership, feeling the weight of the day lift slightly from his shoulders. He knew there was still much work to be done, but he was ready for it. Ready to lead, to teach, and to remind everyone of the core values that defined his business and his life. He would return in a few weeks, he decided, to check on the progress and to ensure that the changes he had set in motion were taking root. For now, though, he felt satisfied that he had taken the first step toward restoring the integrity of his brand, reaffirming the mission he had set out on so many years ago. And as he drove away, he couldn't help but smile. The day had been a challenge, yes, but it had also been a reminder. a reminder of why he had built this business, why he had fought so hard to create a place where everyone, no matter their background, would be treated with respect. Redemption and reflection. In the days that followed his visit to the dealership, Marcus put a plan into motion to address the issues he'd observed. He knew that shifting a company's culture wasn't something that could be achieved with a single speech or meeting. It required a deeper, sustained effort to make sure everyone in the organization not only understood but believed in the values he had built his company upon. Marcus decided to implement a mandatory training program, a series of workshops focused on customer service, diversity, and empathy. He brought in consultants who specialized in corporate culture and had a deep understanding of inclusivity training. Over the next 2 weeks, every employee, from the newest salesperson to senior management, would attend, reflect, and be given tools to embody the values Marcus held dear. But even as he planned the program, Marcus understood that his most significant impact would come not just from training, but from setting an example himself. He knew he couldn't simply impose values from the top down. He had to engage with his team, to listen, and to help them see why these values mattered. He made plans to attend each workshop personally, to lead by example, and be there to answer questions, offer guidance, and encourage genuine, meaningful dialogue. When the first day of training arrived, Marcus arrived at the dealership early. The employees filed into the conference room, some appearing curious, others hesitant, unsure of what to expect. Marcus noticed a few familiar faces among them. Ben, his attitude visibly subdued since their last encounter, and Elliot, whose quiet confidence and respectful manner stood out even in a room filled with people. The training began with a powerful exercise. The consultant introduced the concept of perspective sharing, asking each participant to share a personal story where they felt misunderstood or unfairly judged. The exercise was designed to create empathy by encouraging employees to see things from someone else's point of view. Marcus sat near the front, watching as people took turns speaking. Some stories were lighthearted, recollections of childhood misunderstandings or mix-ups in communication. But as the exercise continued, the stories began to take on a more serious tone. One of the younger saleswomen shared an experience of being ignored in a retail store because of her youthful appearance. Another employee, a mechanic named Carlos, spoke about the frustration of being underestimated because of his accent. Then came Ben's turn. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his face pale as he glanced around the room. His hesitation was palpable, and for a moment, it seemed as though he might pass. But then he cleared his throat, his gaze dropping to his hands clasped tightly on the table. I haven't always been the best at understanding others," he began, his voice barely a whisper. "I thought I knew what it meant to be good at my job. I thought it was about being efficient, about reading people quickly and knowing if they were worth my time." He paused, his jaw tightening as he struggled to continue. "But I realize now that I was wrong. I made assumptions about people based on nothing but their appearance, and I judged people unfairly." The room was silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Ben looked up, his eyes meeting Marcus's briefly before dropping back to the table. "When Mr. James came in the other day, I didn't recognize him. I thought he was just some guy who couldn't afford a car like the ones we sell here. I didn't even give him a chance." He took a shaky breath. "But he showed me something that day. He reminded me that my job isn't to judge people, it's to help them, to treat everyone with respect, no matter who they are or what they look like." A quiet murmur of agreement rippled through the room, and Marcus felt a swell of pride, tempered by empathy for Ben's journey. He knew how difficult it could be to confront one's own biases, to admit mistakes, and be open to change. But Ben was doing it, taking those first steps toward growth. After Ben finished speaking, the consultant led the group in a discussion about the importance of respect and open-mindedness, reinforcing the idea that each customer who walked through their doors was worthy of their best effort, regardless of their background. The room buzzed with newfound energy as the employees engaged in meaningful conversations, sharing ideas on how to create a more welcoming environment for all customers. As the day's session drew to a close, Marcus stood up, feeling a quiet determination to address the room himself. He looked around, meeting the eyes of each person seated before him. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice steady but filled with sincerity. "I know these conversations aren't always easy. It takes courage to look inward, to acknowledge our own assumptions, and to challenge them. I want you to know that I appreciate each of you for being willing to take that step." He paused, letting his words settle before continuing. "This company was built on a foundation of respect for every individual who walks through those doors. We're here not just to sell cars, but to provide an experience that makes people feel valued and seen. We're here to create relationships that last beyond a single transaction." Marcus glanced over at Ben, who met his gaze with a nod of gratitude. "We all make mistakes," Marcus continued, his tone gentle. "But what matters is what we choose to do after. Growth is a journey, and it requires humility, self-awareness, and the willingness to learn. I believe each of you is capable of that." As he spoke, he noticed the employees sitting up a little straighter, nodding in agreement. The atmosphere in the room had shifted, the initial hesitation replaced by a collective sense of purpose. They were beginning to understand, to feel the weight of the responsibility that came with representing not just a business, but a set of values. The workshops continued over the next 2 weeks, each session building on the lessons of the last. Marcus attended everyone, sitting in the back quietly, listening, observing. He watched as the employees engaged with the material, participating in role-playing exercises, discussing scenarios, and reflecting on their personal experiences. By the end of the program, Marcus could sense a genuine shift in the team's outlook. But Marcus didn't stop there. He implemented a mentorship program, pairing new employees with seasoned staff who exemplify the company's values. He wanted to create a system where people could learn by example, where respect and empathy weren't just buzzwords but principles lived out every day. Marcus made it a point to visit each dealership personally at least once a month, talking to employees, listening to their feedback, and reminding them of the importance of their work. One afternoon, a few weeks after the training had concluded, Marcus received an email that left him deeply moved. It was from a customer, a woman he vaguely remembered seeing during his unannounced visit. She described her experience at the dealership, how she had felt dismissed and overlooked initially, but had later received help from Elliot, the young salesman who had treated her with respect and genuine interest. The woman wrote that she had never felt so valued in a store before, that Elliot's kindness had left a lasting impression on her. She thanked Marcus for creating a company where people like her, who didn't look like they belonged in a luxury car dealership, could still feel seen and respected. Marcus printed the email and pinned it to a board in his office, a reminder of the difference his company could make in people's lives. He felt a surge of pride, not in himself, but in his team. People like Elliot, who had taken the training to heart and were working every day to make the dealership a place of true inclusivity. A few days later, as he walked through the dealership, he saw Ben interacting with a customer, a young man in casual clothes who looked uncertain as he browsed the cars. Marcus watched as Ben greeted the man with a warm smile, patiently answering his questions, guiding him through the options, and treating him with the respect Marcus had hoped to see. Ben caught Marcus's eye and gave a small nod, a silent acknowledgement of the journey he had embarked on. Marcus nodded back, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. The transformation he had hoped for was taking root, one interaction at a time. As Marcus left the dealership that day, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. His mission was no longer just about building a successful business. It was about creating a legacy of respect and equality, a place where every person, regardless of their appearance or background, could walk through the doors and feel valued. And as he drove away, he knew that the work would never truly be over. There would always be new challenges, new biases to confront, new lessons to learn. But he was ready to meet them, confident that he had built a team, and a company that was committed to growing together, to lifting each other up, and to making the world just a little bit better, one customer at a time. A new vision. Months had passed since Marcus's unexpected visit to the dealership, and his mission to foster a culture of respect, inclusivity, and genuine care was beginning to bear fruit. His vision of a dealership that saw beyond appearances was steadily taking shape, with every employee embracing the values he had fought so hard to instill. Yet Marcus knew that this wasn't just a one-time transformation. It was a continuous journey, one that required constant reinforcement and commitment. To ensure the new ethos was cemented, Marcus introduced an initiative called the Customer Connection Project. This project encouraged employees to go beyond mere sales interactions by creating meaningful connections with customers. Employees were urged to learn more about each customer, to treat each encounter as an opportunity to genuinely understand their needs, and to approach every interaction with empathy and respect. The program included a customer storyboard, a space where employees could share positive experiences with customers. Each week, the best story was highlighted, serving as a reminder of the impact that respect and care could have. Slowly, the storyboard became a cherished part of the dealership culture, a place where employees found pride and purpose in their work. On a crisp autumn morning, Marcus arrived at the dealership for one of his monthly visits. He made it a point to stay connected with each of his locations, to see firsthand how his vision was being implemented. As he walked through the dealership, he noticed the energy in the room felt different from the days when he'd first introduced the new values. There was a genuine warmth among the staff as they greeted him, and he felt a renewed confidence that the culture he'd envisioned was taking root. Elliot, the young salesman who had initially stood out for his respectful demeanor, approached Marcus with a wide smile. "Mr. James, it's great to see you," he said, his voice filled with enthusiasm. "We've been looking forward to this visit. We've had some great stories to share on the customer storyboard. I think you'll really appreciate them." "Lead the way," Marcus replied, smiling as he followed Elliot toward the storyboard area near the showroom floor. The board was filled with handwritten notes, photos, and small mementos from customers. Marcus took a moment to read through some of the stories, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction as he saw the impact his employees were making. Each story reflected a moment where a customer had felt valued, respected, and understood. A small smile touched his lips as he read one note from a customer who had struggled with credit issues but had been treated with dignity and care, ultimately leaving the dealership with a car they loved and a positive experience to remember. As he read, Marcus noticed Ben standing nearby, watching him with a respectful yet slightly hesitant expression. Over the past months, Ben had made a remarkable transformation, showing a willingness to learn and grow that had surprised even Marcus. He no longer relied on first impressions to judge customers, instead taking the time to engage with them meaningfully, listening to their needs and concerns with genuine interest. "Ben," Marcus called, beckoning him over with a warm smile. "I see you've made some great contributions to the board here." Ben's face lit up, and he nodded modestly. "Thank you, Mr. James. I've been working hard to make things right, to really embrace what you taught us." Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'm proud of the progress you've made. It's not easy to change habits, especially ones that are so ingrained. But you've shown incredible dedication, and that speaks volumes about your character." Ben's expression softened, gratitude shining in his eyes. "It's thanks to the chance you gave me, sir. I used to see customers as just transactions, but now I see them as people. People with stories, challenges, dreams. It's changed everything for me." A moment of shared understanding passed between them, and Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that true change went beyond policies and procedures. It came from touching people's hearts, from inspiring them to see the world, and each other, with empathy and respect. Just as Marcus was about to continue his tour, a voice called out from the entrance. "Excuse me, is Mr. James here?" Marcus turned to see an elderly man standing in the doorway. His clothes were simple, a bit worn, and he carried an old leather satchel over one shoulder. His expression was one of uncertainty, his posture slightly hunched as though he wasn't used to being the center of attention. "That's me," Marcus replied, walking over to greet him. "How can I help you?" The man looked relieved, extending a hand in greeting. "My name is Harold McLean," he said, his voice soft but steady. I wanted to thank you personally, if I may." "Thank me?" Marcus repeated, genuinely surprised. Harold nodded, a faint smile crossing his face. "Yes, you see, I've heard about the changes you've made here. The focus on respect, treating people with dignity. I'm not here to buy a car today, but I wanted to tell you how much that means to people like me." Marcus felt a surge of curiosity. "I'm honored to hear that, Harold. But if you don't mind me asking, what brought you here today?" Harold glanced around, a look of nostalgia in his eyes. "Years ago, I came to this dealership when I was going through a rough patch. I just lost my job, and my old car had broken down beyond repair. I was desperate, trying to find something affordable, but I was turned away, treated as though I wasn't worth anyone's time." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "That experience stuck with me. I felt small, invisible." Marcus felt a pang of sadness as he listened, realizing the weight of Harold's words. "I'm so sorry that happened to you," he replied, his voice sincere. "No one should ever feel that way." Harold nodded, his gaze meeting Marcus's. "When I heard about what you were doing here, how you were changing things, it gave me hope. Hope that others wouldn't have to go through what I did. That's why I came, just to thank you for seeing the value in people like me." Moved by Harold's words, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. The changes he had made weren't just about business or profit. They were about creating a space where everyone felt they mattered. In that moment, Marcus realized that his mission had grown beyond his initial vision. It wasn't just about transforming his dealerships. It was about leaving a legacy of respect and empathy that would ripple out into the wider world. "Thank you, Harold," Marcus said, shaking the man's hand firmly. "You've given me more motivation than you know." As Harold left, Marcus felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. This encounter was a reminder that every small act of respect, every gesture of kindness, had the power to heal wounds and restore dignity. Later that day, Marcus gathered the entire staff in the showroom for a meeting. As they stood before him, he took a deep breath, letting the weight of his words settle before he spoke. "I want to thank each of you," he began, his voice filled with warmth. "The changes we've made here aren't just about our business. They're about creating something larger than ourselves. A place where every person who walks through those doors feels valued, seen, and respected." He paused, letting his gaze sweep over the room. "I've learned that respect isn't just a policy. It's a choice, one we make every day, with every interaction. And together, we've shown that we're capable of making that choice, of building something truly meaningful." As he continued, he shared Harold's story with them, letting them see the real impact of their work. The staff listened intently, some nodding, others visibly moved by the tale. When Marcus finished, there was a quiet stillness in the room, a sense of shared purpose that bound them all together. From that day forward, the dealership flourished, not just in sales but in reputation. Customers who visited the dealership felt the difference. They sensed the genuine care and respect that radiated from every employee. Word began to spread, and people traveled from far and wide to experience the unique atmosphere that Marcus and his team had cultivated. Months later, Marcus received another letter, this time from an industry association. The dealership had been nominated for a prestigious award for excellence in customer service and inclusivity. Marcus accepted the nomination with humility, knowing that the real reward lay in the impact they had made on their customers' lives. On the night of the award ceremony, Marcus brought his entire team to the event. As they sat together, listening to the accolades and acknowledgments, he looked around at the faces of the people who had joined him on this journey. Elliot, who had always embodied the spirit of respect, Ben, who had undergone a profound transformation, and Steve, the manager who had embraced change with open arms. When Marcus took the stage to accept the award, he spoke not about himself, but about the power of community, of shared values, and of the choice to treat every individual with dignity. His words resonated deeply, and he left the stage to a standing ovation. As they returned to the dealership the next day, Marcus felt a deep sense of peace. He had built not just a business, but a legacy, a place where respect was woven into the fabric of every interaction, where each customer, regardless of appearance, was seen as valuable. And as he walked through the showroom, watching his team at work, he knew that the vision he had set out to achieve had become a reality, one rooted in empathy, one destined to last long after he was gone.